You are listening to Pharmacy IT and Me, your informatics pharmacist podcast. Hey everyone, this is Tung Dao and welcome to another episode of Pharmacy IT and Me. As with every episode, we start off this one stating that the intended audience for this episode are those who actually work for institutions where they need to request clinical reports. So today's episode, it's going to be a little different than previous episodes because it's geared towards individuals working as pharmacists, researchers, medication safety, or other roles that may not necessarily be pharmacy informaticists. One of the most common things that I tend to hear from different places that I've worked at is that the clinical staff or, just the regular inpatient staff of the department would be asking like, can't we run a report for that? And for the most part, can the reports, otherwise known as reports already built by the vendor, can serve that purpose adequately. However, there are times when customized reports need to be created to fit the needs of the requesting department or individual. That's who we are targeting today. If you ever needed to request for a custom report, hopefully today's episode can provide you with general guidelines on how to request for this data so that you can leverage your informatics resources appropriately. So before we get into that though, I'd like to say thank you again for sharing our special panel episode regarding what to do if you don't match for residency. By the time you hear this, Dr. David Vu should have already posted on social media the positive responses that we received from that episode and how it's a not talked about topic that needs to be talked about. Because of this positive feedback, we will be working on future collaborations for you all, though we can't exactly promise a timeline on it now, and it's because it's difficult to gather 4 or 5 people all together, considering, how everyone's so busy nowadays, and we hear you, and we are working on that, so just know that. So let's get into today's topic. Before we begin talking about how to request for the data, just wanted to remind you that these are what I find are useful, but by no means is it the only way of requesting for reports, so your mileage may vary. Also, to remind you why report requests should be structured, the way that information is stored in an electronic health record is through what's called a relational database. So in the podcast episode 32 and 50, I briefly go over what relational databases are, if you'd like to listen to it for a review. Depending on where you work, report writers can range from those who solely have a technical background to those who have both a clinical and technical understanding. So you could be requesting it from a straight-up programmer versus an informatics pharmacist who happens to know how to program reports. So in my opinion, if I receive a request for a report, I would need to know the following: who's requesting it, the purpose of it, what are my qualifiers, and what is actually being pulled. So let's go into each one briefly. So who's requesting it? You should include whether you are requesting this or someone higher up is requesting this. The reason is because this gives the programmer an idea of whether this report may be a duplicate of an existing report that they programmed for someone else. In addition, sometimes the one-off reports that the programmers get requested to do have to be prioritized appropriately, and usually one-off reports are not used by many people, so it becomes lower on the totem pole. If a staff requested for a report versus a governing auditing body, then of course the report will be stratified in the different priorities. So the purpose of the report. Again, including the purpose of the report helps the programmer check the repository for any other reports that may be a duplicate. If not, at least knowing the purpose of the report can help the programmer look into some other reports that are somewhat similar, so it gives the report writer a good jumping off point. Including the purpose may help with you getting a result faster, since you are kind of helping the programmer to find the best steps on how to begin the report writing process. In addition, if the purpose is for good reason coming from an appropriate department, then the programmer may also stratify this as a higher priority than not. Not having a purpose in the report request kind of gives off an impression that the requester doesn't know what they want. Alright, so qualifiers. Qualifiers and what is actually pulled are very different yet very related. When I'm talking about qualifiers, I'm talking about the specific conditions that would define the dataset that is being selected. So things like patients who are over 18 years old, patients who weigh more than 65 kilograms, only male patients, etc. These are conditions that limit the dataset down, and therefore these are the qualifiers. You need to define these very clearly for the programmer to program into the report. Now, what is actually being pulled back is like, after you already have the dataset from the qualifiers, now the question is, what are you actually going to care about in this dataset? For example, in the previous dataset, you only care about patients that are over 18 years of age and, where they're getting their prescriptions. But your qualifier would be the over 18, and the actual information that you're pulling is going to be the patient's name and the address of where they're picking up their prescription. So being clear on the data that you want to pull back will help guide the programmer a lot better and hopefully give you a report faster. Alright, so hopefully this strategy can help you with how to request a report from where you work. Let me know if it works for you or if you think I should be including something that I'm currently missing, but I'm hoping this will help improve how you request data in the future. Alright, if you guys like this episode, you can subscribe and rate us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or any of your other favorite podcasting services. You can also follow us on social media on Twitter or Facebook at PharmacyITme or Instagram at PharmacyInformatics or by emailing me at tony@pharmacyitme.com. And I also wanted to plug a great networking opportunity called Pharmacist Connect. If you are familiar with Microsoft Teams or Slack Workspace, think of Pharmacist Connect as a large vetted one through Slack Workspaces. I've met some great colleagues on it, and there's even an informatics space within it as well. You can find out more by visiting pharmacistconnect.com, which is PharmacistConnect.com. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of Pharmacy ITME. And remember, technology is the tool, patient care is the goal.